outreach is a mandatory part of it. You always have to set money aside for some kind of outreach, be that defined as it may be. But yeah, would you like to say? I have a rather I'm not in academia.
DESY hat in Hamburg über die letzten Jahre ein beeindruckendes Innovationsökosystem aufgebaut. Durch die enge Zusammenarbeit mit Arzneimittelunternehmen, mit Startups aus der Biotechnologie oder der europäischen Hightech-Industrie hat PETRA IV das einmalige Potenzial, sich in diesem Umfeld zu einer tragenden Säule auch der anwendungsorientierten Forschung und damit zu einem Modell des Transfers bei Helmholtz zu entwickeln.
Die Verfügbarkeit und der Zugriff auf ein hochauflösendes analytisches Werkzeug wie das 3D-Röntgenmikroskop bietet für die anwendungsnahe Forschung einen entscheidenden Mehrwert.
Durch In-vivo-Messungen können Zielmoleküle punktgenau optimiert werden. Das heißt, Drug-Targets werden noch genauer beobachtet werden können, also jene Moleküle, an denen der Wirkstoff eines Medikamentes ansetzt. PETRA IV kann also einen wichtigen Beitrag leisten, Medikamente schneller und gemäß den strengen Anforderungen der Regulierungsbehörden auf den Markt zu bringen.
Darüber hinaus ermöglicht das hochauflösende Werkzeug eine deutliche Verkürzung von Entwicklungszeiten, da technische Fragestellungen nicht nur symptomatisch, sondern ursächlich bearbeitet werden können.
Wenn wir PETRA IV rasch realisieren, wird es eine bedeutende Investition in die Zukunft der Helmholtz-Gemeinschaft, aber auch des Forschungs- und Entwicklungsstandorts Deutschlands insgesamt sein. PETRA IV wird Spitzenforscherinnen und Spitzenforscher aus aller Welt nach Hamburg ziehen. Hier liegt auch ein Kristallisationspunkt für die deutschen Forschungsorganisationen.
Durch die Vereinigung innovativer Großforschungsinfrastrukturen wie PETRA IV und der wissenschaftlichen Exzellenz von Partnern wie Fraunhofer schaffen wir gemeinsam die Voraussetzungen für eine resiliente Wertschöpfung und technologische Souveränität.
Deshalb freuen wir uns auf diese essentiellen Forschungsmöglichkeiten, den verbesserten Zugang für Industrie und die neuen Serviceangebote.
Hello and welcome. Give it up for the video ambassadors. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this very special event. We are here today to celebrate a major milestone on the way towards realizing PETRA IV, a light source a microscope like none other before it, that will open up totally new avenues of research, and a microscope that will challenge the distinction of basic science and applied science. My name is Georg Dahm. I am a science journalist and startup founder, and I will be your host for today, guide you through this very interesting event. The next 2.5 hours will be very packed because the good people at DESY have put together an amazing roster of interesting scientists, which I bet could sit together and talk all day, but 2.5 hours is all that we have. So we're going to have to make do with that. But the good news is there will be a 30-minute break in between, so you will have the opportunity to catch up with some of the panelists. Of course, all of you except those out there watching this on YouTube, small consolation, when PETRA IV is ready for launch, then we will probably already meet in the metaverse and distance will not be a problem. And now to set the stage, what is to come, it is my pleasure to announce Helmut Dosch, Chair of DESY's Board of Directors. Mr. Dosch, please.
Thank you, Georg. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to open this kickoff event for the PETRA IV project. So we present today the transformation of our PETRA III synchrotron radiation facility in the world's most powerful X-ray microscope. So we will hear today that when we look into the past, the design of novel revolutionary microscopes has always initiated new discoveries, breakthroughs in innovation. And we have invited a famous witness for this claim, Stephan Hell here, who can tell us first-rate, how microscopes work for science and for discovery and for innovation. So we are experiencing a lot of interest in this new facility, actually by all actors, national actors in science, research, technology development, and also by the entire international community. I'm also similarly excited about the strong interest today in this kickoff meeting and the high-level attendance to this kickoff meeting. So my task now is really to warmly welcome you to this event. I'm convinced that today you will get a deep impression on this project, and which we will discuss here in all the different perspectives and various panels. So I'd like to welcome first our panelists. Among them are Edith Hurd. She is the Director General of the Embl, an outstanding researcher in epigenetics, and she is the Director General of our premium cooperation partner here on site, the Embl, where we, I think, have a cooperation since 30 years or more, full of discovery and full of excitement. So it's a pleasure to welcome Stephan Hell here with us. He is a director in Göttingen at the Multidisciplinary Science, Max Planck Institute for Multidisciplinary Sciences, and for medical research in Heidelberg. As we know, he got the Nobel Prize for the design of the STED microscope, where he showed the world how to, devise new microscopes, essentially by ignoring established textbook wisdom, isn't it? He will tell us a little bit more, I guess, today about it. I learned that just yesterday and the day before he was with the Pope and was praying for the project together with him, so I hope that this is also helpful for our exercise. We have here Bernhard Hesse, the CEO and founder of Exploration. Welcome to us. It's a real pleasure to welcome Maital Landau. She is professor at the Technical University in Israel. She is hopefully very soon professor here in Hamburg, jointly appointed by DESY and the University Hospital here in Hamburg. She is a rising star and an expert in infectious diseases. It's also a pleasure to welcome Ben Henryson. Where are you? Here you are. He is a research manager at the BASF, and he's a very heavily sought advisor to the BMBF in all areas of innovation. It's a very big pleasure to welcome Dame Claire Gray from the University of Cambridge. She is a leading expert in battery research, and her eminent role in this research field has recently been highlighted by the Kerber European Science Prize last year. And then we have Sami Haddadin from the Technical University of Munich. He is a world-leading expert in robotic and machine intelligence. And maybe the one or the other is wondering, why is he here? Maybe he's not him, but the avatar. But we invited him, and you will learn today also why he is an important person for us for the design of this new machine, PETRA IV. A special welcome also to our colleagues and friends from abroad who have been traveling to join us. So I know that Jean Dior is here. Jean, are you around? He's maybe still in the plane. He's from the French Synchrotron Radiation Source in Soleil at Paris. Also, Chin from the ESRF research director was announced, and he might also have difficulties to travel. I'm asking, is Peter Hedström here? Peter, you made it. He is representing the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, and we are closely collaborating with them. And I wanted to welcome also, traveling from abroad, the DG of the European XFEL. He was traveling from Schenefeld to here, and he has not made it either so far. So he's okay. So a lot of traffic jams around, apparently. So it's also a real pleasure to also welcome high-level representatives from industry. Special welcome to Henning Fehrmann who is also chairing our Innovation Advisory Committee at DESY. So I want to welcome Michael Bolle. He is Stiftungsratsvorsitzender Carl Zeiss AG, and I know that she could not come, but he is on the streaming. So Herr Bolle, herzlich willkommen bei uns. And Magnus Fredriksson from Alfa Laval from Sweden. So these are our industrial connections. People who what we call are fast movers, who are moving with us in new areas of materials design, and we hope that with them we can actually devise something what we call now a transformation of the way how we make materials and devise new drugs, what we call now an ecosystem for data-based solutions. Last but not least, our representatives from BMBF and from the BBFGB, and this is a very strong and hearty welcome, because finally we need them to realize, to transform this project from vision to reality. So I appreciate really that you are all here. So it's wonderful that we can meet face-to-face for this important meeting. I hope you enjoy this afternoon, and I'm also very curious, what we are gonna hear today. Again, welcome to all of you, and have fun this afternoon.
Thank you. So today we are talking about building a world-leading synchrotron radiation source, and that is no small task. And one of the few people in this room who know this from first-hand experience will now come on stage, Harald Reichert. He has already played a major role in the development of the extremely brilliant source at the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility in Grenoble. And after more than 10 years as a director for research in physical sciences at ESRF, he has now joined DESY as a project leader for PETRA IV. And we will now hear from Harald Reichert himself why this project is so important for tackling many of the challenges that humanity faces. Mr. Reichert, if you will.
So, thank you very much, and of course I welcome everyone here as well. And not only on behalf of myself, we also have quite a few of members of the project team here, which I would also like to mention here. So what we are talking about here, I only have 10 minutes for that, is what can we do with this machine that we can't do with PETRA III? Why do we actually want this beast? Let me see. So, and I want to take you first on a journey to set the stage for this. Now, if I just click through this rapidly, you see that there's something growing. And it starts historically way back in the 60s. DESY was among the very first institutions that realized very early on the power of using X-rays produced as a byproduct or as a nuisance from particle accelerators. They realized that this actually has a large potential. And it went through a series of machines. Actually, the first one, I should actually use this one. Let me see, does it show this? The first one was DESY. It was actually a rather, let's say, modest machine in today's terms that actually was mostly used by pioneers. It was a handful of pioneers that actually developed all of this, what we see today. This led, in the next step, to the use of the next accelerator here, the Doris machine, which is now also decommissioned, and actually was the core for growing a real community of experts using this. It went from a few pioneers to actually quite a community of experts. Then the next step came with PETRA III. PETRA III was a machine that was originally also built for particle physics, and after going through several stages, first of a dedicated machine by itself, then as a pre-accelerator for a much larger other machine, it is actually now serving as PETRA III as a radiation source. And again, we managed to actually grow the user community, the people who actually use this, again, substantially. And we have today a large community of users that actually know what to do with a machine like this. But it's still experts, if you want. Now, what we want to do with PETRA IV is take the last step, and this is what you see here. We would actually like to democratize the whole thing and roll this out to people who have never attended a physics class, have never looked into how such a beast works, and may still get something out of it. That's actually the big task that we are setting ourselves with this machine. And this spans actually 6 decades. It goes from the 60s now to the 20s, and until this machine actually works into the 30s, the 2030s. So it goes from parasitic use, we were parasites once 60 years ago, to dedicated use. This is now the main machines, large-scale machines that DESY is operating for photon science, and it goes from small to large. Now, DESY is a part of the Helmholtz Association, as you have seen before, and in the address by the Helmholtz president, and we have certain tasks that we should fulfill. One is that we provide instruments to the research community to actually tackle the big challenges that we face in our societies today. And if you look around, it's in its mission statement for Helmholtz, it's all the energy-related questions that we have today. How do we produce energy efficiently? How do we store it? How do we use it? And how do we actually do this in a way that we do not harm our environment? Yeah? So these are all questions that Helmholtz as an association has a big task in. And this is precisely what we want to tackle with this new machine. So you see all these hot topics here that are the big challenges for our society. Now, we already have PETRA III, and PETRA III serves thousands of users with a multitude of instruments. So why do we actually want this machine? Now, my answer to this is very simple. If you look at PETRA III, it was built for experts. It wasn't built to serve a community of non-experts coming from industry or all walks of life, if you want. We do not have the tools today to serve this community. And this is what we will change with PETRA IV. Now, you have also heard by our president that we have actually managed to build a real innovation ecosystem here. And in that sense, PETRA IV will be the core of what's called, or what's being developed here, the Science City Hamburg-Bahrenfeld. It is meant to work as a nucleation site to foster innovation using advanced modern technologies. And this is precisely what we are building here. And we're doing this not only alone. You have seen we're talking and integrating a lot of partners. We have the Max Planck Society here. We have the European Molecular Biology Laboratory here. We're talking with the Fraunhofer Society to get engaged here, and a multitude of other partners. So this is a collaboration that actually builds and is open on partnership. And just to show you a few things, what we actually want to do with this machine is, if you go in the health sector and look at what we are actually doing today already, at least to a certain degree, but we want to do this 1,000 times better, and in a way that it's accessible to everyone. And this you see in this. Look, if you let me see, where is this? It's that one. If you start on that side, this actually starts on the molecular level. This is the level where we actually control the atomic, with X-rays, the power to span scales. Right? You can go all the way from the organ level down to the molecular or atomic level. And this is one of the scale bridging functions that X-rays have between electron microscopy, which has a higher resolution, and light microscopy, which actually is on the upper side. We're actually spanning the gap in between, as you can see here. Now, this is, of course, something that you can, in parts, already do today. What's the big new thing here is, again, that we would like to transform this from partially heroic experiments, like I would call that. Many of the things that you see on those slides are one-off experiments. Why? Because they take years of preparation, very difficult to do, and they're not easily repeatable just by anyone. And that's precisely what we want to change with this machine. So this is an example from, or was an example in the health sector. I show you one in the energy sector, where you see very nicely what we can do here today already. This starts with the actually molecular composition of materials that we are using, the next generation materials that we are using for batteries, that go all the way from materials development to investigations of material stability to actually to device performance. Device performance, we are talking about pieces of centimeter to maybe even tens of centimeter size that you can actually watch with the same instrument. You go all the way from the molecular or atomic level up to the device level. And this is the part that is very hardly accessible today, or, as I said, in heroic experiments. That's the part that needs to be changed. You find the same on the technology side, where we also go full cycle. We start from designing materials from the ground up, and you see here an example in strain engineering on this side, which is actually used to tailor electronic properties of nanometer-sized electronic structures, all the way to manipulating individual bits in an actual chip, or actually imaging an entire chip to check its integrity. So these are the kind of full cycle experiments and tools that we supply to the community in the future. Now, the project itself is a project, as you can imagine, will take some time, is a massive project. We are now in the planning phase, and this is the kickoff for it. As you can see, we're in the preparation for a project proposal to our funders, the Federal Ministry of Research and Education and the City of Hamburg, which also has to bear some of the costs. And as you can see, this is a multifaceted project that essentially spans almost a decade. So this is a massive project where, unfortunately, we will have a dark time of 2 years when we have to shut down PETRA III, because we will reuse a large part of the infrastructure that we already have to make this project fast and easily realizable. So this is the two things that you should take with you. This is the start of our official campaign to actually submit the proposal and get it hopefully approved within maybe a year or a year and a half, and then followed by construction with a dark time in 27 and 28, and the return to operation with the possibilities that I mentioned just now. Now, the one thing that is really new here is we are promising what basically everyone does who builds a new machine. The new machine will be 1,000 times better than the old machine. This is what you've heard many times before. right? What's really new here is we change the way we operate this machine and actually make it available and accessible to the community. So the second part of our proposal, which is actually this one here, deals with the operation and what we actually offer to our customers, if you want. Yeah? The academic user community, but also industrials. It's a whole new range of services that we will develop for this with a new way of actually using the data that we produce here and much more adapted ways of accessing this facility. And that's the key to actually bring all those people in that today are not used to come to facilities like this one. So, and this brings me almost to the end. PETRA IV is at the heart of what's happening here at DESY. So DESY is of course, the host site for this, but as you have seen, this we're not doing alone. We're doing this with a whole range of partners, and some of them are sitting here, luckily. You see that the thing that we really want to implement here, or will implement, is a whole new service concept, a whole new concept of dealing with data, because this machine will produce a massive amount of data that we have not seen so far. So that's something we need to deal with. A new way of accessing this facility, that's our access model, and a role that DESY can take in a unique fashion as a knowledge broker. We're the only ones who have a full overview of what our thousands of users actually do at this facility. We know who knows what. We can bring people together. That's one of the key roles that I see for this new facility. And with this, we serve, as we should, the higher goals of our society, meaning dealing with the grand challenges, and also dealing with other important factors that are a little bit forgotten sometimes, like technology resilience, which in the current world political climate, as you can imagine, takes on a more and more important role. So in summary, this is a €1 billion project. We're building the world's best machine. It's transformative for DESY as an organization and the site. And it comes with a whole range of new things that we haven't seen so far at facilities of this kind, meaning a new open business model, open for partners, and with innovation at its heart. And with this, I'm finished.
Thank you very much. So now we will get down to the actual science. We will take a look at what this new era of research actually will look like, and we will hear how scientists are going to make use of these new possibilities. And in our first panels, we have 4 scientists that, each in their own way, have pushed the boundaries in imaging science and can give us a glimpse of what we can expect in the next couple of years. And I would like to call on stage first Edith Hurt, please, Professor Edith Hurt, Director General of the European Molecular Biology Lab. The EMBL, as I'm sure you're aware, or you can applaud now. That's great. If you take any chair you like, especially for the except for the one in the middle. So you can sit close to the microphone, which is always good. As I'm sure you are all aware, the EMBL has been involved in many groundbreaking developments in imaging science. And Edith Hurt has been along for a couple of them. But her area of focus is research on epigenetics and developments in disease. She's a very distinguished researcher in that field, both as a group head at EMBL and as a professor at Collège de France. I would also like to call to stage Stephan Hell. He almost needs no introduction because few people really have furthered our understanding of life like Stephan Hell has. He has revolutionized light microscopy. I'm very sorry, this is a mouthful. And he has turned it into a tool that can show living cells and tissues at a resolution that was previously unimaginable. And the list of awards he's got for this is longer than most people's CVs. I will just mention the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2014. And he's the director of 2 Max Planck Institutes, and he's also a co-founder of Aberio Instruments, which makes his innovations available to scientists anywhere. Thank you very much for coming here today. Then we have Bernhard Hesse, and Bernhard Hesse is what I would like to call a bilingual scientist. He speaks 2 languages, he speaks physics and he speaks medicine. And he uses these superpowers to help biomedical researchers make sense of what they can actually do with the synchrotron. And he's the founder of Exploration, a startup that advises researchers from academia and from industry in how to use the synchrotron, how to apply for beam time, how to set up and run the experiments, and how to make sense of all the data that comes out of the machine. And he did his PhD at Charité and at the ESRF, where he's still a guest researcher. Thank you for coming. I would also like to warmly welcome Meitai Landau. She is a leading researcher on amyloid fibrils. And as you know, these proteins are best known for their role in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. But these fibrils are also secreted by microbes. And this raises a lot of questions about the role of infections and diseases like this. Meitai Landau is a professor at the Technikon Israel Institute of Technology, and she also runs a research group here at DESY Center for Structural Systems Biology. And she will, as we heard, also soon take up distinguished professorship here, jointly undertaken by DESY and by UKE. Thank you for coming. There is a lot of very, very long multi-syllable words that I'm kind of choking on, so I hope this will get better. I'm very sorry. Professor Hurt, I would like to start with you. The EMBL has started a new 5-year program that goes by the title of Molecules to Ecosystems. And if I understand the concept correctly, the idea is that if you want to understand complex processes like the rise of COVID-19 or the rise of antibiotic resistance, we cannot just go into the field, take some sample, plug it out, put it into the lab, poke it a bit and see what happens, but we have to go into the field and observe the specimens there in real time. Is that about right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely one aspect of it. I think the reason why EMBL decided to build up this new program from molecules to ecosystems is because we realized that life happens in the context of changing environments, be they, microbes in a gut or human beings exposed to a new pathogen. So we really do need to think about ecosystems and life in this changing environmental context. And there was this realization also that in the life sciences, we're at a very exciting time where we really have the technological advances, the tools. Thanks to some of the people here, we can, look down microscopes. We can look at almost atomic structures of proteins. We can predict better than ever before some of the changes that happen in life cycles, be it on the timescale of multiple generations in evolution or on the timescale of an enzyme working. So we have so many tools and so many approaches, and yet as life scientists, we have tended to always focus on studying life in a very controlled environment in a laboratory, because of course we want to be rigorous, we want to be reproducible, and so sticking to life in a laboratory is actually much easier in some ways, but that's it. The time has come, we have the tools, and we have the need. And I have to say, when we built up this program, it was before the pandemic started, just before. And in a way, it felt a little bit Cassandra-like, because we'd actually started discussing what would an emerging new pathogen look like? How would an organization like EMBL be able to rise up to the challenge of an epidemic or a pandemic? And then a year later, it hit. And we were ready. And the reason we were ready, at least when it comes to molecular life sciences, is because Embl deals with molecules. These are the building blocks of life. Viruses are made of molecules. Human beings are made of molecules. And we actually had the tools and the resources to be able to rise up to some of the challenges. And those included, for example, collecting data, the best data possible, curating it, cataloging it, storing it, and sharing it in a responsible way. So doing open science and making sure that we were sharing data as quickly as possible and as responsibly as possible. So this was actually crucial during the pandemic, but in a way, it's an example of exactly what is going on in this new program, which is indeed to study life in context, hoping that we won't have too many more pandemics to deal with, but there are other challenges, as we all know. The impact of climate change, the impact of pollution, and just simply the impact of life as it changes, because there are constantly moving sort of forces in the environment. So we felt that it was important that we do this, and Embl is designed as an organization that serves the scientific community. One of our most close partners from its inception has been the DESY partner. And we, back in the 1970s when Embl was created, we already knew that this was the site where we needed to be able to do the most state-of-the-art, the most advanced structural biology. And we've had this close and very successful partnership, and it's embedded in our new program. In fact, in the new program, where we want to study all sorts of molecules in all sorts of different environments, there's a whole chapter on PETRA IV, and on all of the possibilities and opportunities that PETRA IV will bring in understanding the molecular basis of life in context. So, we will be able to visualize through X-ray imaging approaches, through structural biology approaches, in unprecedented ways, what really happens at the atomic scale across time. So, if it's a drug that's being used to treat a specific type of disease, or if it's a new type of antibiotic, or if it's some kind of a new pathogen that is infecting a cell, we need to be able to visualize this, and we need to be able to understand the dynamics of this over time. So this is what the new program's about, and as I said, PETRA IV is deeply embedded in our plans.
Yeah. Of course, I saw that one of the pillars of this new program will be this enormous expedition called TREK, which you are starting next year, which will be an expedition along the coastlines of Europe, and you will take samples at 120 different sites. And so I was wondering, how does this work? I mean, we have this huge, very stationary machine here, and you are going out into the field and you want to do field research. How do you bring together the field research with this idea of studying life in context?
Absolutely.
And with this enormous machinery?
We were wondering how we were going to bring PETRA IV to 28 countries, and we rapidly realized that probably this was a bit of a logistic challenge. So indeed, we came up with this concept of mobile labs. So Embl has to serve 27 countries, or 28 now. Germany is actually our most important member state, but even within Germany, not everyone can necessarily benefit from the technologies that Embl can provide. So we will take Embl to where life happens. So working in close collaboration, for example, with the EMBRC, so the marine stations across Europe, we would like to take Embl's expertise and some of our techniques to different sites where we will be sampling in collaboration with scientists there. And so indeed, TREK is our flagship project to traverse coastal regions in Europe and to look at the land-water interface by sampling deeply at all scales, from the microbial scale right up to the whole organism scale. And we've already started, and we've seen how we can then bring our samples back in the right conditions. So in order to do, for example, cryo-EM, we need to be able to freeze samples in situ as quickly as possible. So we've already been able to take the equipment required to do that freezing to different sites, collect the samples for genomics, for structural biology, and we've even brought samples back to PETRA IV, so we can actually look at some of the marine organisms that are being used a little bit as models for environmental change to use X-ray imaging. And so some of these samples are being used to really try and understand what is the diversity you see in different regions. But to do that, we need to be able to actually go to the site in situ. We can't, as you said, we can't just scoop up a bit of water and soil and bring it back and hope for the best. So these mobile labs will be fully equipped to allow us to collect the samples under the right conditions that we can then bring back to very large instruments such as synchrotrons or even cryo-EM machines.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to studying life and context, that is something you also told me, Maita, about your research when you want to study the very complex and poorly understood roles of amyloid fibrils in disease processes. Usually you would take the proteins out of the cell and you would analyze it. Now, using techniques like PETRA III and in a better way with PETRA IV, you can study it in context. Could you elaborate a bit on how this has furthered your understanding of these very mysterious processes?
Yes. Is it working? Okay. So one thing that using instruments like PETRA III gave us is that once you know how a molecule looks like at the very molecular atomic level, then you can make connections that you didn't even think about before. What this science gives us is the opportunity that is beyond our imagination. We are used to imagine only things that we can visualize, but we can't imagine something that we never saw. And something that we noticed, for example, is that for certain molecules that are actually produced by bacteria is very, very similar to molecules that are causing Alzheimer's. And we couldn't have acknowledged this before. And this raised a lot of important questions. One of them, we all heard about prion diseases, like the mad cow disease. If you're exposed to eating contaminated meat, from human brain or from even cows, can you get a disease? And does it have to do with the similarity between the protein from the cow and the protein from the human? But now that we know that microbes produce something very similar, it raises the questions. Is infectious diseases our propensity for Alzheimer's? Maybe our microbiomes, if we take probiotics, we take antibiotics, what we eat, what we don't eat, affect our propensity for neurodegenerative diseases. And this comes from understanding of the structure. And the good thing, maybe this is a little bit scary, but the good thing is that we also realized that, okay, if we developed so many drugs for Alzheimer's, and we can debate for days why they don't work, but still the molecules are there, and they have been through clinical trials. And we realized that some of the compounds that were already in clinical trials can be used to fight infectious diseases because they work on the same proteins that look basically the same. So we can repropose now drugs from one field that was extremely studied to a field that we have no drugs available. And we wouldn't even be able to think about it if we don't have the atomic resolution information that makes these connections. So for me, PETRA was very important.
Yes. And of course, in the field of Alzheimer's research, there has been this big excitement in recent weeks about possibly manipulated images and studies from 2006 that have been very widely cited, and those were imaging techniques used on single proteins. So do you think that a new generation of imaging, like PETRA IV, that will be able to image things in context will make fraud less likely because you can always see the whole picture? Would that improve the quality of research and the ability to check the integrity of research?
Well, we can learn, I think, two general things from science that has been done in synchrotrons. First of all, for the area of Alzheimer's, I think our understanding, or better yet, our lack of understanding of this field didn't change because of these recent events. Let's be, if I think about it. But what we do learn is that data that we produced in synchrotrons and we published for many years now, we always deposit raw data. And this is something very critical and should be applied to a lot of other fields, because if we are obligated to publish and deposit raw data in banks, and we cannot publish our papers without that, then it forces people to publish raw data, and it can prevent such things from happening. Another thing that I have to be honest, you can fabricate a lot of things, but if you're able to cut and paste pieces of diffraction map and put them together to something coherent, like it's more than a Nobel Prize if you're just able to do this. So it's really hard to fabricate actually synchrotron data or diffraction data. So I think we are safer there.
Okay, great, thank you. So, Dr. Hesse, you have use synchrotron-based X-ray imaging for especially studying on the nanoscale how particles from bone implants migrate into the bone marrow and cause damage there. And these images, I can only recommend you check out the exploration websites. The images are really, really amazing. That's a level of detail that's really astonishing to look at. But when you look at it, it seems so obvious. Yes, of course, we should use an instrument like X-ray imaging to go down to the nanoscale, but obviously not a lot of people are thinking about it. So what does it take to set up a study like that, and why don't more biomedical research use these possibilities?
Yes, thanks for the introduction. I think it all goes back to what Harald Reichert was saying just before, so that currently synchrotron facilities are used by experts. This example of implant materials and the migration of nanoparticles into the body, that's the reality for orthopedic people working in hospitals and so on. And this is not the same group of people that are coming here to do experiments. So what we try to do is bridging this gap and help people to perform this kind of experiments. And it's very impressive to see that this is one of the aims for the new facility here, to make it open to really everyone, including medical people working in orthopedic departments. Actually, for us, we understood, let's say, from our own, let's say, networks, that there is this kind of question about implant materials, and due to our expertise from working in this kind of facilities, we saw the connection. And it actually only took us like a short time to convince that we should do this kind of experiments. And of course, it's then not easy, because you have to prepare sample, extract human material, get all the authorizations to perform these experiments, and then analyze the data. But I think technically it's a very easy experiment. So we must really ask, why was this not done? Why was that not done 10 years ago? And well, I think we just answered this question. And I think the next steps now should be, there is this exposure of, for example, nanoparticles, for example, coming from implant materials. But there's other sources, like environmental sources of particles into the lungs, or contrast agents in the brain. So there's endless examples, and we should now look at what's the consequence for the tissue. And if we speak about consequences for the tissue, we would need big data, many samples, and not just this, let's say, one scan per experiment. So that's a bit. And
this is, of course, the image that a lot of people have when you talk to them about accelerators, about synchrotrons. They think of these, well, it's always a huge machine, but as the especially huge machine like at CERN, where people prepare an experiment for decades or years, and then they run it once, and then they discover the Higgs boson, or they don't, and then it's over, and they have to retool the whole thing. But that's not the kind of research we're talking about here. So a tool like PETRA IV will be able to do really a high throughput of experiments. Can you talk a little bit about how that will affect the quality of research, the quality of data?
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's two levels of data quality, I would say. So one level is that just the image or the data, the raw data quality will increase with the increased photon flux and higher coherence and so on. So we will just have nicer data. But for our applications from the biomedical world, it's not just to have one nice image, it's about many nice or high quality data. So we have high quality data that we want, and that should be even better than what we have already. But we also want to have many of them, which means we increase the quality of the results. For example, and I stick to this example of the implant material. If you want to see what the, let's say, nanoparticles will do to the surrounding tissue, it's not enough to scan 5 samples from a control and 5 samples from a exposed group, because there's a high diversity between patients, even within the patient. The diversity of the material is just crazy. So what we would like to do is to scan hundreds or even thousands of samples, and we get there. I mean, my colleagues just now perform a high throughput experiment where they measure more than 200 samples in one day, and I think with the new facility here, we will be able to do the same thing on even larger samples, and with all this implementation of also data handling, we can also analyze these data. And I think this will help to really break through new discoveries, and also discover rare events where you need to scan many samples, because the event is not just taking place in every sample. So I think that's what's so interesting about this project. We
are talking a lot about applications today on the stage. Professor Hell, you famously were not thinking about applications when you were really drilling down on the development of stat microscopy. My God, this word, microscopy. So, in your experience, when you want to solve a scientific challenge like that, is it good to have an application in mind, or do you think it's always best to focus on the scientific problem to solve, and that will give you more energy for the long run?
I think it's a very good question that you're raising. I mean, there is no general answer to such a specific question. Is it good to have an application in mind or not? So I can only explain what I did, or what my view was. I was a physicist by training. I studied in Heidelberg physics, and I got intrigued by this problem of the diffraction barrier in light microscopy. And my only motivation was, to be very honest with you, to solve it. I didn't have any application in mind. Now that we have Edith sitting next to me, I can tell an anecdote that I rarely talked about. So I came to EMBL in 1990, in December 1990, and I talked to some of the people there, and they were all brilliant and famous biologists. Of course, I didn't know them because I was a physicist. And I said, I want to improve the resolution, to see details. Then there was a person, I remember his name, Brian Story was his name. He was a cell biologist, and I said, what could you do with a high resolution? Maybe you can look at a Golgi. And then he came to me saying how important the Golgi was, and the thing, I said, Golgi? And then I went to a colleague and said, there is a guy who wants to look at an animal, it's called Golgi. I thought Golgi is a kind of specific animal, like a bug or so. So I had no idea. I didn't want to do anything for biologists or anyone else. I came there because I wanted to sort out the physics problem. And to be honest with you, I think this was one of the major ingredients why I was successful, because I didn't have an application in mind. I just looked at the problems in a total naive way, without any goal. And this is, I believe, the reason, or one of the major reasons why I looked at a problem with totally different eyes and eventually found a solution.
But you went for a very, very long time. Nobody believed in you. You didn't get any funding and everything. So what made you stick to your guns in that area?
Yeah, it was, in those days, there were two problems that I faced. It was not thinkable, actually, that one would find a serious solution for the problem, a physically viable solution to the problem. And because there was this paradigm, and of course people in earlier, I mean 50s, 30s, 20s, there were even letters to Einstein of people saying, I can't break the diffraction barrier. And they were all kind of nuts. And then why should this guy who comes now be right? This is one of the things. So why did I believe that I'm right and the others are not? Because I was arguably well trained as a physicist, and I looked at a problem and I had found a way that I knew is physically sound. It was technically difficult, but physically sound. And once you realize the physics of it is sound, and that's what I'm also saying to my students now, then it'll come, even though there are technical difficulties, because technical problems can be solved over time, and others help them solving them. And lasers get better, computers get better, and so on. But if something is physically sound, it'll work, and it'll come. And that's, I think, the most important criterion. So whenever there is a new challenge, a new project or so, one should kind of distinguish between technical problems and conceptual problems. The conceptual problem is most likely going to stay. The technical problems will go away. And if that is the case, then one should go for it, because then, in the end, it'll work.
Mm. Everyone here on stage has, I think, a little bit of a different perspective on this interaction of application and the development of tools. So, and you all have worked in different research landscapes. So, to close the session, I would like to get a finishing statement from each of you. If there's one thing you could wish to come true to make a tool like PETRA IV really come to fruition and to do for science what it can do? What would that be? What kind of support would your area of research need in order for this tool to become available to all scientists and really deliver for humanity? If you would like to start, maybe Maitai.
I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking, and there is something that was said about that it's still an area of experts, right? The synchrotrons, and I didn't think about this before, but after this session, that some tools are being developed just because even non-experts have the opportunity to use some tools because they bring fresh ideas, they bring new problems that experts need to deal with. And I think making large infrastructures accessible to not just international, but to non-experts and to actually help them use this facility can really facilitate new ideas and different applications to different methodologies. So the needs create the fresh ideas and the implementation. So accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also didn't expect this question.
It's a good question.
Yeah. What I was hoping for is this kind of facilities really turn out into service facilities, and which I think means that also the staff working on the beamlines is not like overwhelmed by supporting the users. So it means I think there has to be enough people to be able to really perform the experiments and to help the non-expert users to come here and support them. I think without enough staff and, let's say, a highly skilled scientist, this dream of Harald and everyone here will not come true. So I think people should not, let's say, save on the human resources aspect of this, on the staff that actually do the experiments.
From the perspective of the Embl, who has fostered so much development in the technology side.
That's absolutely. And maybe I could just start by saying I don't disagree. I agree violently with what Stephan actually said, that you need to have this sort of obsessive, compulsive approach to understanding a problem, technical or conceptual, and that's how discoveries are made. For me, curiosity-driven research is at the basis of everything, and that's what Embl also does. And it leads to technologies, it leads to applications. But to answer your question, I think for me, what really is exciting and the opportunity that PETRA IV brings is this capacity to integrate many different approaches and to get a glimpse of, in the case of the life sciences, things that we could never see before. With the increased capacity, the coherence. I mean, I'm not an expert, but what my colleagues tell me is that we can really start to get visibility at the atomic scale of what's going on in a cell, a tissue, an organism. And for me, what really needs to happen is that we can harness that, new opportunity to integrating it with all the other approaches that we have. Embl has been quite good at doing that, bringing people who do genomics, bringing people who do, molecular biology, bringing people who do imaging together. PETRA IV represents the ultimate opportunity to do that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this integration will work. And it goes along with this concept of, I think you said, democratization or socialization. Exactly. I want anyone to be able to turn up with their sample and to be able to say, okay, let's see what's going on, and to be able to integrate all of these approaches. And I think this is what the DESY campus provides and what PETRA IV will allow us to open up into. That's my wish. Integration.
Thank you. Professor, what do we need for more Nobel Prizes and more breakthroughs?
It's hard to tell, but one thing I'm quite sure. I think this concept of democratization is a very good one, because I suspect, but I may be completely wrong, that you might find solutions in an area that you did not anticipate. And this is exactly what such a facility will be good for, but just by opening the field and, say, hiring people who want to do something else, perhaps, that you else compared to what you initially planned. That may make it highly interesting, especially that you can you're planning to democratize this. So you might make a discovery that you do not anticipate, and I would even bet that's more likely than the rest of it.
So, thank you all. Thank you to the panel. We've heard a lot about serendipity. We have heard a lot about integration, high throughput, about working together. And now, as I promised, there will be a 30-minute break so you can all catch up and dive deeper into those topics. Thank you. If I could kindly ask you to take your seats, put down the coffee cups, and start enjoying the thought of the even more lovely things you will get later at the reception at City Hall. And for now, go for some spiritual nourishment with the next talk.
Vor über 60 Jahren begann am Standort Hamburg-Bahrenfeld durch die Zusammenarbeit des Fachbereichs Physik der Uni Hamburg mit DESY eine erfolgreiche Forschungskooperation. Mit dem Konzept der Science City Hamburg-Bahrenfeld wird nun ein weiterer Meilenstein gemeinsam realisiert. Und hier entsteht nicht zuletzt ein großes Transferpotenzial dieser neuen Erkenntnisse mit Verwertungsmöglichkeiten auch für Gesellschaft und Wirtschaft.
Ich denke, es werden herausragende Wissenschaftler und Wissenschaftlerinnen aus der ganzen Welt nach Hamburg kommen, um hier eben diese Technologie nutzen zu können.
Ich begrüße und unterstütze es sehr, dass DESY die Kooperation mit der angewandten Forschung und der Industrie heute bereits ausbauen und noch weiter optimieren möchte.
Außerdem wird sich daraus ein Innovationsökosystem ergeben, wie man heute so schön sagt, und eine Kultur entstehen, in der eben Start-ups im technologischen Bereich, im Bereich der Materialforschung, aber durchaus auch im Gesundheitsbereich diese Ansiedlungschance sicher gerne wahrnehmen werden.
Wir, die Uni Hamburg, sind stolze Partnerin dieses für die Science City Hamburg-Bahrenfeld zentralen Forschungsinfrastrukturvorhabens. Die Röntgenlichtquelle PETRA IV wird für unsere Arbeit ganz neue Forschungsmöglichkeiten eröffnen und die Attraktivität des Standorts für Forschende weltweit nochmals erhöhen.
PETRA IV wird die Herstellung neuer Werkstoffe und Materialien entscheidend voranbringen. Vor allem die Tatsache, dass Experimente wesentlich beschleunigt werden können, bietet gerade für Partner in der Industrie Vorteile.
Wir müssen unabhängiger werden von Energie- und Rohstofflieferanten, souveräner bei den Technologien und auch, dies ist mir persönlich besonders wichtig, nachhaltiger.
All right, welcome back to the second part of our PETRA IV event. In the next panel, we will hear a bit about how PETRA IV can contribute to the development of sustainable materials, and I think we can all agree that we are in dire need of some breakthroughs in that area. I mean, the state of the German solar cell industry is a very sad state. Let's not talk about wind turbines. We still haven't really figured out green energy storage yet. We are hunting all over the planet for green hydrogen. So there's really a lot to be done. And so I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk with 4 outstanding scientists who are doing groundbreaking work in this field. So first I would like to ask Professor Claire Gray to the stage. She has pioneered the use of imaging technology in battery research. Her research group at Cambridge University is using a multitude of technologies to see inside of a working battery, and she's also pioneering the use of new materials in batteries. And as we have heard, she was awarded the Kerber European Science Prize for her research. And thank you very much for being on stage. As we also heard, she has been made a dame, but she doesn't like to make a fuss about it, so I'm just going to mention it once and then drop it. Okay. I would also like to call to the stage Dr. Ben Henryson. He's kind of like Germany's industry synchrotron ambassador, I would say. He's a research manager at BASF, where he's the go-to guy for all things X-ray research. And he's also a member of the Komitee Forschung mit Synchrotronstrahlung, KFS for short, which is basically the German user group of synchrotron users. Welcome, and thank you for coming. I would also like to welcome Patrick Huber. He has a research interest that is very fitting to our northern weather, usually, not today, but usually, because he's very interested in the question of how fluids behave in confined spaces, like in nanopores. And he's researching how we can use this behavior to our advantage by creating nanostructures and materials that can create energy and act as a battery. He's a lead scientist at DESY and also a professor at the Technical University Hamburg. Thank you for coming. Also, if I might ask you to move up one chair so you can take the microphone, otherwise people won't hear you. And last but not least, please come to the stage, Simone Techert. She's an expert in imaging chemical reactions in real time. So sometimes I imagine her looking at a tree and looking at the leaves and thinking, photosynthesis, that's quite a neat trick, but I think we can do one better. And she's currently focused on developing a new kind of solar cell that will generate electricity as well as hydrogen. Thank you for coming and talking about your research. So I would like to start with you, Professor Gray. In the first half, we have seen some images and heard a lot about how we can use novel imaging techniques to look inside of a living cell, to analyze living processes. You are working with quite a different animal, so to say. So what are the structures and processes exactly that you like to analyze inside of a battery? What would you like to make, or what are you trying to make visible for your research?
Well, we are also working with cells, as you point out, but slightly different ones. So I think we're quite good at understanding how the components in batteries operate in terms of structures, changes in oxidation state. But I think what we increasingly now want to do is to understand how they're all related. And so to put it very simply, you have an anode and a cathode, but the structures, the evolution, the degradation processes on the cathode, we're increasingly learning now impact the anode. And so it's really about trying to develop methodologies to correlate different processes. So those could be correlative within a system, they could be within the battery in itself, or they could be correlative with time. So how does something that we see in time t=0 evolve? Does it crack? Do gases get released that then impact something else in the cell? So I think we need to obviously develop methods to be better at looking at things with increasing resolution and time and whatever, but also, importantly, to correlate those evolutionary processes.
And this particular line of research, what requirements does it put upon the radiation source you work with? You said you have these cells and you have these very complex processes you would like to make visible over time, so I imagine you have to put the sample again and again at different time slots, always under the same conditions. So do you need a special kind of setup that is rarely found?
I think often it can be bespoke. I mean, you've got two different approaches. One, you take a normal battery, and then you've got to basically use very high energy X-rays to get inside. But then that brings with it compromises. There are other type of batteries called pouch cells where they're plastic, and those are more accessible to more standard methodologies. We've done experiments, for example, where we have used little coin cells, where we've shaved down the metal so that they're very thin, and then you can go in and then you can design a cell that can cycle for months, and then you can interrogate what happened with the beginning and the end. And I think moving forward, I think we've done that at a sort of level of many particles, but then to do that at an individual particle level and to track that with time is where the challenges lie.
Dr. Henryson, you smiled knowingly. Of course, research on battery materials is one of your fields of expertise as well. So when you look at the possibilities of PETRA IV, what would you like to do with this new tool once it becomes available? How will it solve problems that you have today?
It will solve, well, I hope it will solve a lot of problems that we have today. And I think that one of those beautiful things that I learned today, the democratization of this wonderful beam, is going to be one of the key roles. Yeah? And what we're trying to do at the moment is set up high throughput experiments where we really are going to measure all of the materials that we produce in our research facilities in the synchrotron beam, so we can get beautiful diffraction patterns from each and every single material that we develop. And that is going to be run into the thousands. That can only be done with really high brilliant sources, because you can't afford to measure for longer than a second to collect the data. So this is one of the things we're going to look at, and it goes far beyond batteries. It goes to catalysts, to polymer materials. You know, they're a huge issue currently with regard to pollution and biodegradation, and we have to understand more about them. So they're one of the fields that I see a lot of potential, as well as, of course, with batteries and the energy storage, which is very high on our priority list.
And when you talk to your industry colleagues about the type of research you're doing, do you draw blank stares, or is it commonly accepted knowledge that synchrotron imaging is the way to go in this field of research?
Well, I think with all of the fantastic research groups like Claire Gray's have done in the past years, they've used synchrotron facilities quite intensively, and that's become, at least in the battery field, very well established. Yeah? So you don't draw blank gazes there too much. But I think a lot of catalysis research is also done at synchrotrons, but there we can do still a lot more. Yeah, especially with materials with high energy beamlines, where we can look at more amorphous state materials that don't have to be crystalline to understand their structure. There we can really benefit from high energy beams.
Mm-hmm. And you both focusing on battery research. How high are your hopes for major breakthroughs in coming up with new and possibly more sustainable battery materials in the near future, maybe aided by imaging techniques?
Well, that's quite a challenging question. We are looking into high manganese. No pressure. So we're looking into high manganese, which is going to do away with a lot of the cobalt. Well, hopefully virtually all the cobalt and a lot of the nickel, which are both of the more problematic metals that are in use currently. One of my favorite materials, which BASF is not really intensively researching, is lithium-ion phosphate, which is a beautiful material. I mean, it's high in phosphor, but it's non-toxic, and it's is beautiful in its storage capacity and cyclability. But the high energy materials which you need for the really performance batteries, those are going to probably be high manganese in the future. Yeah? Well, at least we're betting on that, and we're putting a lot of effort into researching those materials. But perhaps you've got other ideas.
Any promising candidates there in Cambridge?
Well, I think you've covered most of the scope, but I mean, the lithium-ion phosphate, of course, has its renaissance, and the prospects of maybe putting some manganese in that maybe give you a little bit more. I think we should also talk about the role that sodium might play in at least in energy storage applications, maybe not in the highest energy density cars, where you need high energy densities. But I think that sodium is interesting because it does allow you to move away from cobalt, and you can look at iron and manganese cathode systems, and then I think as an academic, I'm lucky because I can dream. I don't have to be quite as practical as you. Then I think that the lithium airs, the lithium sulfurs, and just really rethinking, what do you mean by different energy vectors? We have redox flow batteries where liquids come in and you can oxidize and reduce them, and then there's very strong parallels with fuel cells. And so if you're going to have a hydrogen economy, how do we put all this together? So, I think as an academic, we have to think sort of beyond today's systems and think about what those vectors would look like. So I'd go for sodium. And I also think that just sort of where we should be going, you talk a lot about your wish to just do lots of different materials and just to sort of produce lots of data. But I do think collectively as a field and with a new synchrotron, we need to think about standardization so that we can compare, and it's all very well sort of open data, but actually that data has to be truly open. We have to be able to scrape it. You can't just. So I think it's difficult enough even in my research group to tell people to collect things in a standard way. So you have to think about that in terms of these multiple data collection projects you're thinking about.
So that sounds like there are no really established standards of gathering, processing, and presenting data in these fields. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, everybody, just to give a simple, wants to charge their battery with a slightly different protocol. I mean, there are test regimes that are standard for if you want to put it into a car, you will do a certain constant voltage, a constant current, and then constant voltage and certain pulse powers. But still, if you want to be able to compare, there's a lot of standardization that needs to happen, and it's not easy because you're asked about bespoke cells. I mean, you have different cells, and each of that will result in slightly different data collection, slightly different voltages, because you've got an anode and a cathode. If you've prepared it slightly differently, then the overpotentials would be different, and so there's a lot of stuff that where standardization could help. And in the catalysis field, it's particularly bad, where not bad, I meant challenging, where comparing samples can be very very different. If you're going to have a big debate on something, then you have to sort of compare similar samples to ground the results.
It gives me very great hope that you both seem to be enjoying this challenge very much. So I think there's going to be exciting times ahead, and I also find it very interesting that you do so much research into trying to find replacement for scarce mineral resources, and there's a lot of discussion about that if we are too dependent on materials that are only found elsewhere. So that brings me to you, Professor Huber. Maybe I am oversimplifying things a bit, being the science journalist that I am, but I understand that your approach to sustainability is kind of like this. Instead of using materials that are limited, that are hard to come by, that are potentially harmful, why don't we just work like nature, use what we have and modify its properties until it does what we want it to do? Is that oversimplifying, or is it kind of fair?
A little bit, but it's also not only my approach, it's basically the approach of nature, or in particular biology. Biology uses in a way very almost primitive elements like carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, and other very simple elements to provide a tremendous complexity in structures, in mechanical properties, but also in functions. For example, in plants, you have not any kind of strategic element to make actuation. It's just a combination of these very simple elements, very often with water, and then you can nevertheless get a very efficient functionality. And that is something when you look at, or the last, 30 years in terms of this field of biomaterials, people learned that it is done by multi-structural, hierarchical structures on each level of length scale, different kind of building blocks, nanoparticles, nanofibers, the next structure, helical arrangement, and so on. And on a macroscopic scale, then you get an effective medium properties, which you would never get with these very primitive elements without this hierarchical structuring. And our approach is now to mimic that artificially. How can we fabricate such structures in a sustainable manner? So take just carbon, structure it by self-assembly processes or self-organization, combine it with processes like 3D printing to get really device scale, and have then a device which operates with relative simple elements.
Mm-hmm. And what are the breakthroughs or the advancements that you hope you will be able to achieve once PETRA IV is up and running?
For PETRA IV, it's in particular interesting that you have this multi-scale monitoring of these structures, and not only the structures but also the processes in terms of fabrication. For example, we work a lot with nanoporous materials, so we put tiny holes into materials, and you get a cubic centimeter which has an entire internal interface which is on the order of a soccer field in terms of a surface. But to learn how this works, you need to monitor this process also and to understand it. There is not really a good understanding this, in particular on, let's say, the single pore scale. So we would like to see what is going on in a single nanopore, if there's water invading, if it's transforming the material. And there I think we can learn a lot and will learn a lot with PETRA IV.
And if I understand it correctly, you're working on a technology where you nanostructure a material, I think like silicon, and just by water moving in and then moving out again and drying, it will generate and store electricity. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So can you talk a bit about where in what areas you will apply an energy collector like that?
It's not a perpetuum mobile. It's kind of this idea that you have, it's not just water, it's salt solution. So the salt solution invades into the porous medium, and then the porous medium, we apply a small voltage, then there is a formation of counter ions at the pore wall. You call it Helmholtz layer, actually, after our pioneering Helmholtz, no founder on it, but let's say the name is after him. And then if you try it, so you try to remove the water, then the ions, they have to rearrange, and then you get an increase of voltage, an increase of energy, and so part of the evaporation energy which you have to put in to get the water out is transformed directly in electrical energy. This is a challenging thing, but it is similar what Mr. Hell just said. I think the physics works. There are many challenges in terms of really getting the drying without salt crystallization. And if it would work, it would be a very interesting approach to harvest energy in a situation where there's no wind and no sun. Because you could, for example, use just waste energy from some high-performance computing center where there's a lot of waste heat to make this drying, make wetting, drying, and then harvest the energy.
So I think that's called micro-energy harvesting. It was kind of a big thing, a fashionable term a couple of years ago, and then kind of went away. But like a lot of times with these things, once the technology is there, then the application will come.
There are a couple of, it did not went away completely. There are one thing, for example, if you have such a material, and you can consider it as a zero-power sensor. Imagine such a small piece of material which is just nanoporous. It comes in contact in water, and immediately there's this energy produced. Even there, it's completely autonomous. There's no cable, nothing. It just could indicate there is water in a simple sensor level. But you can also use it in general to have, whenever you have changes in the humidity, drying, wetting, you can have autonomous actuorics and autonomous sensorics. That is, let's say, on a small device scale. On a larger scale, if this, I mean, I'm in a collaboration with people from chemical engineering, and then they did the analysis of the overall performance, and then you, for the right material, but there we have to optimize things, you can have like 100 watt per square meter, which is compatible in terms of the power, specific power with the solar cell, 10% effectivity.
Okay, that sounds like a challenge. Professor Techert, when we're talking about the efficacy of solar cells, maybe you could explain first how you are going to create a solar cell that will create electricity as well as hydrogen. What's the underlying principle there?
So in principle, what we do is, you all know the graphics. You have a solar cell, you have a cable, and you have a storage device. And what we did is we shrinked it all down to molecular scale. So we have it together in one little device. So we do not only have the solar cell, but also the catalyst on the surface or in pores or whatever, and in between conducting materials. And with that, we can produce hydrogen, and we can store electricity, or even photoconvert. So finally, what we like to do, we would really like artificially to do what the plant is doing in a cell.
And what materials are you basing these constructions on?
I have to admit, we have studied, I think, 300 different chemical reactions and about 1,000 materials. So it's a long way to go. And so it turns out that some of the perovskite systems are very good, but not the one which are lead containing, but have other rare metals, in particular for catalysis rather than for light harvesting. Light harvesting, we currently focus on, if you want, plastic materials, because we are up to 25% in quantum efficiencies. And this gives us a good base to put them, if you want, as a base, and then to build everything on that.
Mm. And what are the areas in which you are hoping for the advancements that PETRA IV can bring for your research?
I think I try to think about a good picture. And in Germany, we had this year, the year was as wet as it was before, or as dry. And the reason is that it was in the north very dry and in the south very wet. So on average, it was the same wetness like all the years before. And I think the same is true for our solar cells, for example. We have an average value. And with PETRA IV, you can go beyond that averaging statistics. So you can really look point by point in time and space how things will convert, how things will move. So you can see the Alps of your solar cell, as well as you see the Elbe River of your solar cell, if you want. And with that, we can, of course, learn much more what we can do in future with these kind of devices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our time certainly is, again, almost up. These panels are really very, very tight. I would have liked to talk with you a lot longer. But I would also like to close this panel with a closing statement. Let's see if it's going to be as surprising as the last one. So I would like each of you to give a prognosis when the next real breakthrough in your field will be market ready, be it a new generation of battery, a fantastic solar cell, an artificial sponge that generates electricity from saltwater currents. So just hazard a guess, please.
So I think for the solar cells, it will be in 5 to 10 years, but going to more complex systems which merge more functionalities, it will take another 15 years.
Okay.
Similar answer, 5 to 10 years. We also promised this in our European project in this way. But actually, I have to say that we made a very promising and successful experiment recently, which is very encouraging. And we promised also to bring it really to the industrial scale, and we have a company involved in this consortium, and we hope that this will be really doable. And that turns out that that's also about science. It was a little bit different than we had originally anticipated how it works. So it's always interesting also to have this curiosity involved.
I think
I think the battery ones is maybe easier because there are continual developments that are coming into the marketplace all the time. I mean, I'm very interested in fast charging. We have a small company that's pretty much ready. There are sodium-ion battery companies that are really being very close to the market. And then you've got very different technologies like the sulfur ones that are maybe further away. But I think it's a field where there are a lot of real incremental but important changes that are happening all the time. And then, of course, there are other things. And I always say that if people say it's 15 years away from the market, it means that there are a couple of steps they don't know how to solve. And at that point, it's very difficult to predict. But I think the field is one of significant incremental steps. And then maybe we'll get there with the step change, the big ones, but who knows when.
Well, now this is tough. I think next year. Yeah, how about that?
You win.
Yeah, because and next year there's a huge BASF plant that's going to come online. That well, actually, it's gearing up at the moment to produce lots of battery materials, cathode active materials. So that's going to be a great game changer. It'll be able to also produce the newer generation as our research develops. To produce the newest generation of these this black magic powder that goes into every battery cell. And then there's another thing that's just really cool: hydrogen production from methane. Yeah, that you just crack the hydrogens off the carbon, and then you get a solid carbon and lots of hydrogen at about the 1/9 of the energy cost of electrolysis, and that's a pretty cool piece of work that's in pilot scale at the moment, and is probably going to come out in, I don't know, 2-3 years in real production scale for BASF. So quite exciting times.
That is quite exciting. Thank you all. And in case research does take longer than you all anticipated and all gets very hard, you can always think of Professor Stephan Hell and take him as an example, and this will make you persevere for many years to come. Thank you. So this brings us to the final panel for today, and we are going to talk about AI and robotics. We have heard several times today how PETRA IV will allow for high throughput experiments, and we have heard about the need for standardization, we have heard about the need for automation. So all of that, of course, means there's going to be machines that need to be built, and there's going to be technology that crunches all these large amounts of data that come out of those machines, and we have the perfect expert to help us make sense of this all. I would like to ask to the stage Professor Sami Haddadin. He is a pioneer in tactile robotics. His robotic arm has been named a milestone by the German Patent Agency. It's been on several magazines, so a poster boy of robotics, so to say. And he has done research on several prestigious German universities and at the space agency DLR. And currently he's at the Technical University of Munich, where he is, I have to read this, acting director of the Munich Institute of Robotics and Machine Intelligence, for short, MIRMI. And he also holds the chair of Robotics and Systems Intelligence. I'm very sorry I have to read this, but it's a really mouthful. A very impressive CV. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
And I would also ask again our PETRA IV project leader, Harald Reichert, to come on stage as well, so we can engage in a little talk on AI and robotics. So you have been given the tour today, and we have heard a lot about how scientists using synchrotrons would like to set up automated experience. So from your first impression, doable, not doable?
Well, that's a big question, I guess. So there's many wishes, let's put it this way, many grand expectations that could be interesting, but I think it is an amazing opportunity. So when I hear this term of democratization, this seems to be one of the core goals that I heard today. I think it's very clear that this can be a major step. And if you think about where does this concept of democratization really originates from, and where do we use it a lot? It comes from digitization, right? So complex technology that everybody has now in their pockets. So you all have supercomputers in your pockets, and this is enabled by intelligent algorithms, intelligent machines. So it's a hardware and a software problem, and then it was made accessible to all of us. So, which also means that the interface between the machine and the human is very important. So it's basically bringing cutting-edge technology that is not yet ready to be operated by a layman or by non-experts. I heard people who don't know even physics laws, right? They will be able to operate DESY IV. That's an amazing challenge, and this means you need to bring the basic technology much, much closer to these laymen. And how do you do that? Via intelligent machinery, digitization, and really smart algorithms. And I think we have just recently seen an amazing example from our field, so robotics, AI, where the democratization of machine learning has been basically making it possible that intelligent algorithms are being used by physicists, by chemists, by natural sciences in general, and also many people in computer science or AI and robotics who have never done machine learning. So we have this creation of tool sets of digital software algorithms that have been made accessible to a greater community of science. So now that machine learning has basically been becoming a tool to all the different sciences. And this is kind of, I think, the spirit that I'm hearing here, to democratize this very, very complex technology. Robotics, AI, big data algorithms, standardization, all these aspects really need to be pushed forward to really make out of a kind of a synchrotron, I guess, an intelligent synchrotron that you could even call a robot at some point, so that really can interact with the scientists to basically, execute the experiment that you wanted to execute. So that would be a fantastic vision, I think, with lots of challenges at the same time, obviously.
I think I will confuse the camera now by moving between you. I think that will be
Yeah. I was actually sitting here, so that you had space there.
Beneficial to the conversation. So, Reichert, you have, of course, thought about automation in the construction of the whole PETRA IV project as well. So how will you go about automizing experiments where the outcome is not really clear? That which you do not yet know is the most interesting thing. So how do you automate a discovery of things that are not yet known?
That's, again, a tough one. How do you prepare for things you don't know that are coming? One way is that we divide this up into pieces, like in a chain. There are certain pieces that you can actually automate easier than others. So, for instance, the whole process of collecting the data acquisition, is something that is very similar throughout most of the experiments. So that is something that I think we can very early on automate. Same thing is the preparation of the beamline itself for the experiment, because a lot of it is done by hand today, again and again and again. When an experiment is reconfigured, we actually start what we call alignment again, so that you can actually perform the experiment like it's a fresh experiment. So these are all processes that I think can be standardized and automized by using modern techniques without much of a problem. The problem, really the real engineering problem, will come when you start to do the same thing at the position where the sample sits. Because you have, as you've seen from the previous examples, just from the last panel, the range of problems and samples that come to us is so wide that there isn't a single simple solution that you put in place. We have certain techniques where we know we can do that because the samples come in a more or less standardized form. So we have about, I would say, 30% of our beamlines that we can automize or standardize in this way. The other 2/3, that's just a rough guess, is always open for whatever specific instrumentation or sample environment you need to look into your problem. So there you can automize things to a certain degree, but not completely. You will never be able to do that. It takes years of engineering to do that for a single experiment. And you won't be able to do this on a large scale for all possible experiments. Because one of the big things of this machine is that we will be able to do experiments with a duration of 1 to 3 days, sometimes only a few hours. So if you change that rapidly, this cannot be fully automized in some way. Otherwise, most of the experiments will become more or less bread and butter, as we call it. Yeah. You must have the possibility to do complex experiments.
Yeah.
So, but this is only part of it, because we also have a part that you didn't mention. The accelerators, our machines, do not only produce data on the experiments, the accelerators themselves also produce a lot of data and need to be operated. And that's another point where automation comes in. Not only for building it, but also for running it. And there's actually quite a bit of effort worldwide to bring artificial intelligence into the operation of these accelerators. But I think there's a long way to go still.
In preparing for this talk, I have learned the term autonomous discovery, which, if I understand it correctly, is the idea that not only the execution of the experiment is automated, is done maybe by an artificial intelligence, but the whole design of the experiment, the making sense of the data and then reconfiguring the experiment and doing it again, doing this trial and error thing. So is that something that is still more of a fancy idea, or is that something that has a realistic perspective in this line of research?
Well, I think to be I'm sure this works, yeah. So I think this idea of autonomous knowledge discovery is really not a new idea, but has been a holy grail of AI, you could say, to build machines that really are able to conceptualize experiments, set them up, execute them, analyze them. And obviously, one of the core problems in this idea that has been really kind of, I think, it's not automation, right? It's automation and automatic decision of what the next experiment would be. That's, I think, the big question about autonomous knowledge discovery and then interpreting that results is obviously how can you design and set up experiments, the next best one that is really the one that you want to execute, because you cannot just brute force the hell out of a synchrotron, right? Because setting up an experiment, which either was life sciences or producing a product in industry, really is a very costly process. So the idea of autonomous knowledge discovery is really to kind of close the loop of the sense plan act paradigm on a discovery process. And this is really something where I guess we should not go as far as that this can be fully automated, but I think if you really want to go to this big vision of democratization, what does this essentially mean? It means that an infrastructure becomes a service. So in computer science, this concept of as a service has basically been pervasive. It went through software as a service, architecture as a service, I mean, the internet as a service, right? Everything we use there is a service, but behind that, there's enormous infrastructures that are operated. But if they are not automated so that you can display a service to the user, which here would be the experimentator, it's very hard to actually do autonomous knowledge discovery because this would mean there's many, many manual steps. This typically then means that you cannot do all the experiments you want to do. There will always be very specialized ones, which really need human creativity, this not curiosity-driven research. But if you want to do large-scale analysis with smart decision of which experiments are the ones you want to choose, then I think it's really important that you see this infrastructure not as an autonomous knowledge discovery system, but actually more like an assistive assistive knowledge discovery system that kind of is a little helper that tries to do all the lab work, you could say. So that you don't sit there, for example, in life science experiments, pivoting every day and trying to find the right combination or recipe for your experiment, but actually you come up with a question, so you set up the question, and then the system has the reconfiguration abilities to come up with the right answer. And we have seen the last few years several works published which were called the AI chemist or other questions where basically autonomous protein discovery was done. We all heard of AlphaFold, which is basically a big approximation problem, but still, these ideas really catch up and they produce real results. Also, in drug discovery, this has been catching up, obviously not yet fully autonomous. I think this is something we should not hope for too early, but a very intelligent tool that makes the use of a service really accessible. And I think this is really what could be a very important target here.
Do we have to retrain scientists, or do we have to change the training of future scientists to enable them to think in these terms, to get to the point where they can use AI to aid them in the discovery process like that? Because I imagine standardizing, thinking in algorithms, stuff like that is not what you taught your students. Not
in today's terms. Yes, this is actually true. the job of a scientist at a facility like this one will look different in the future than it does today. Everything that Sami said is perfectly correct. We're not starting from zero. There are efforts that have been started more than a decade, maybe 2 decades ago, also in pioneering experiments that ran under a different name, like combinatorial material science, where you go through vast parameter spaces and trying to find the best material. If you marry these kind of let's say, approaches with artificial intelligence, and I think you know how to do one part, we know maybe how to do the other part. If we can marry that, we can actually speed up discovery of new materials with totally new functionalities a lot. So it's bringing the right people together, and a place like this can actually do that. So this is actually a challenge, because today what we use in AI is essentially existing protocols that have already been developed. So we haven't really brought in the developers into what we're doing. We're applying it, but the developers are not engaged yet. So having someone like Sami here actually is a real jumper for me, because that could actually trigger something like that we get the developers to us and see what the potential here is and explore what we can do together with you.
There's actually a fantastic point you made, which is really that there has been this myth, I call it a myth very frankly, that machine learning, AI, over the last decades can basically autonomously solve a problem. No, it actually needs to be really well tailored to the actual domain. This is really, really important, and the domain basically means exactly this collaboration, this idea that, for example, what kind of information can you bring into the AI system that is domain-driven, which in this case would be the physical experiment, and obviously these two things only together can find an answer. And this is, I think, really the fantastic challenge that lies ahead of you guys here, is really to make use of not only tools, but develop new types of AI tools that kind of understand the processes that you're interested in much better than the ones before. Because so far, most of machine learning and AI we see is, from a mathematical standpoint, rather a function approximator than a true understanding of the nature of the process. And I think this is really where the power of this combination of fields really lies. So I fully agree on that. This is exactly, I think, the ideal setup that you have here.
So this brings us to a very important question. Will you stay?
Hamburg is a beautiful city.
At least
at least for tonight, right? I mean, there's going to be a beautiful party, I heard, and we're going to have great discussions. Yeah.
Great. This also gives me a lot of hope. There has been a lot of moments today that give me great hope. Thank you both for this inspiring talk. I know you will have a lot to talk about behind closed doors as well, in a good way. So thank you for coming. And this brings us to the last part of today's program. I would like to ask even Mr. Dosch to the stage for some closing remarks. What?
Is it already over? Yeah, so I could have listened for another hour, so it was really extremely entertaining. So thank you very much. It was really a great afternoon. And so to summarize that, it's easy and difficult simultaneously. What we all learned is now that what we are doing with PETRA IV and our aspiration to finally democratize this technology, which has been developed in a pioneering way for the last 50 years or so. So we learned that this democratization, so if I look at industrial users, they say, so this allows us finally, to accelerate our innovation chain. We also heard from a Nobel laureate that this finally lures a brilliant idea to this lab to really create a breakthrough idea. So there are many, many things which go along with this democratization idea. So and I have to say, so Germany, we have learned, was among the pioneers of synchrotron radiation exploitation, is currently still a world leader in this field. And why shouldn't be us the leaders in this democratization process of this, fantastic tool leading, as we heard, to new discoveries and to the acceleration of innovation and technology development. So for me, this was really a great inspiration. So I heard many, many ideas, which actually made also a deep impression to me. So I thank particularly everybody who was contributing to this exciting afternoon very much. For DESY, I think, who has a world reputation in devising accelerator-based machines for new science, I think this PETRA IV will be a new chapter in a very proud legacy of the laboratory. I think for science and for on a national level, this will be, so to speak, a machine which really enables innovation and discovery. So thank you very much for all of that. I thank the panelists. I thank the people who came from abroad. I have heard that now from Schenefeld. They are also here. Yeah, they made it. They made it, so they did not only miss the first part of it. So I thank you very much. I thank particularly also, we should not forget about the organizers of this wonderful event, because they were setting up it in a beautiful way. So thank you very much. So that's all what I wanted to say. So now the name of the game is, of course, now to transform this vision into reality. And here we need, the cooperation of many, many people, including our funding bodies. And I know that they are convinced that this must be done. So times are difficult these days. If we look at the geopolitical constraints and the financial, ramifications of that. But I think if a technology place like Germany needs, to innovate itself out of a trap, and I think PETRA IV could be a good machine for innovate us out of also a mental trap. So I'm pretty convinced that we are on a good way forward. This will still take many discussions, but I'm pretty optimistic that we get this done. Thank you very much. Anybody knows what we are doing now? Okay. Okay, so we have 50 minutes to relax. Thank you very much.